Hi, Sarah Crawford here with Sitawi Life Coaching, and today's video is on watching out for red flags within yourself in order to stay centered and as a form of self-care, specifically when you're in the role of caregiving. So we often think about red flags as something that we're watching out for in other people in order to keep ourselves safe. So an example of a red flag that we might watch out for in someone else is maybe repeated lying, or someone who doesn't take responsibility for their actions and instead blames you. Or maybe someone who has overly controlling behavior. Those can be red flags in other people that we want to watch out for. And the recommended action generally in those scenarios is to maybe establish boundaries, or to leave the situation, or even discontinue a friendship or relationship with that person. And certainly that can be great advice, and it can even be life-saving. And I've been recently introduced to this concept of watching out for red flags within ourselves. And so I want to share that with you today in hopes that it provides some empowerment in your work to stay centered in the face of things that might be triggering to you. So what I love the most about this idea of watching out for red flags within myself is it helps me to be responsible fully for my own experience, and as well as my behavior, and also that it doesn't require anyone else to change. And it's rooted solely in paying attention to our own body's signals and taking care of ourselves so that we can be at our best. So an example of a red flag within myself is maybe I'm getting short-tempered, or maybe I'm noticing frustration rise in my body. Usually I'll feel that in the center of my chest or kind of rising through my sternum. Or maybe I notice I'm getting really defensive. So those would be examples of red flags I'm noticing within my body that, hey, I'm off center, something needs tending to, something needs checking in with here. I'm being triggered by something. And sometimes we don't even know actually what it is, and sometimes we do, but we don't know why it's bothering us that much. And so my general advice in those scenarios, when you're beginning to notice those red flags within yourself, is to take some time to check in and see what's up, and to tend inward. And that we may not always have the time or the availability to do that in the moment that we're noticing it. But maybe you can take a step outside for a minute, or fill the bird feeder or something like that if there's an outside task that needs to be done, if appropriate. Or maybe take a moment to use the restroom and sort of get yourself out of the scenario and take a few deep breaths. Reassure yourself that you're okay. Maybe a loving hand to the heart. And if you don't have time to really check in on, like, gosh, why is this bothering me? What's happening within me? Why? It's helpful to make a promise to yourself that you will check in later when you have more time, and then to really honor that promise to yourself and to take the time to check in with that. Sometimes our clients will be, doing something that does really bother us or irritate us, and sometimes it's not really even the thing that's happening that's actually being triggered. So for example, I'll give the example of when my daughter was little. I remember being overly frustrated with the fact that she would insist on having a pink cup versus a purple cup to drink from, for example. And I began to notice that it was like really, really irritating me, far more than what the situation warranted. And so I took some time to check in, like, hey girl, what's up? Why is this bothering you so much? It's really not that big of a deal. And what I recognized for me was that when I was her age, I was at a babysitter's all day long. And it was safe, it was fine, right? Both my parents worked, and that was great. But I didn't get a choice in that. I would have preferred to be home with my mom, and I certainly didn't get a choice of much at the babysitter's either, much less what color cup I drank out of. And so what I noticed is I was actually jealous of my daughter, and felt that I had a really hard time having compassion that she, would. It's a privilege, right, to get to choose between which color cup to drink out of. And so I got to tend to that part in me that felt, that I didn't get that certain thing as a child. And so that it didn't then, come out as anger or frustration towards her. And so I'm curious what this is bringing up for you. If you can think of any scenarios when you're working with your clients that this may come, something like this may come up, and what can you do for yourself or in that moment to take care of yourself so that you're not just reacting or unconsciously responding from that triggered place. Because that can, we end up, being short-tempered with our client, and, I'm sure it probably has happened, right? We're human. But sometimes we can get ourselves into trouble, and then it's, what was a, sort of a painful, vulnerable situation within ourselves then becomes something that, that we end up in trouble with, whether it's with our boss or, the person we care about, or even just, bringing up a lot of self-judgment within ourselves because we're not coming from that place that we're committed to coming from. And I know for a lot of you, that's a loving place. And what's my point here? I'm kind of losing my train of thought. So here's an example, that perhaps might come up in your work. So let's say that you are working with someone who is experiencing memory loss. And you have asked them something repeatedly or told them something repeatedly, and they can't seem to remember what you said. And so it may show up as that, like, they're actually disregarding what you're saying, or they're not paying attention, or they're not listening to you. And perhaps if you feel, certainly, right, this situation can be challenging to navigate. But if it's bringing up more, deeper feelings than what the situation may warrant, maybe it's like, gosh, it's reminding me of when I wasn't, paid attention to as a child, or no one took me seriously, or I wasn't listened to. Maybe it's bringing up or hitting on something a little bit deeper that calls for compassion within you and some loving tending to. I don't know, I keep losing my train of thought, but I think you kind of understand what I'm saying here. So that warrants taking some time with yourself about it, rather than taking that out on, the situation at hand. So what do you hear in this for you? What are some examples of places that you can, or red flags within yourself that you can watch out for, that you tend to know are predictable when you're off center? And what are some ways that you can support yourself in tending inward when that happens, or maybe having a bit more compassion when that happens, so that you can come back to center more easily and be who you're committed to being in your work. This certainly, I don't want to overstep the fact that, when you are in a caregiving role, it's so important that you really do take good care of yourself too. It's a lot of giving, and if you're also not receiving, that too alone can bring up some resentment, or even just the experience of being stretched thin. And so it's important to make sure that your needs are getting met as well, in the midst of supporting to have other people's needs be met. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please post in the comment in the comments what might come up for you around this, or some ways that you can support yourself in the midst of this kind of experience. Thank you very much, and I hope that you're having a wonderful day. Bye.